Joining us now, Republican Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia. Governor, welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Good morning.
So how are folks doing? I mean, I know there was some coastal impact for you. And what's your ability like now to help your neighbors, Florida and South Carolina?
Yeah, very minimal impact at all in Georgia. We really dodged a bullet and certainly blessed by that. And our thoughts and prayers go out to all those that have been affected in Florida and certainly the loss of life in other states too. We were really lucky. I instructed our emergency management director, Chris Stallings, to start allocating our resources where they're needed in other states on Friday, really right after lunch. We had those discussions even starting Friday morning. We haven't had a whole lot of requests, but we stand ready to help. We do have 14 heroes from the Georgia National Guard that are doing search and rescue in Florida, and certainly have a lot of other resources that we can send to South Carolina or Florida if needed, and we stand by ready to do that.
Well, Governor, on behalf of my Florida family and friends, we thank you very much. Now let's get to your race. It is a heated one. We've got brand new Fox News polls in your race that show you with a distinct advantage over your competitor, Democrat. You're quoted this week as saying, "I will tell all people out there, don't believe any of these polls." Now, ours has you up by 7. Do you believe our poll?
Well, no disrespect to the Fox News poll. I'm not believing any polls. We're running like we're 10 points behind. The biggest poll and the only one that matters, Shannon, is going to be on Election Day. And so I'm telling our folks, you know, don't get overconfident. We got to keep working like we've never worked before. We're not only fighting for the soul of our state, we're fighting a lot of outside interests from places like California and New York. Stacey Abrams, 86% of her money is coming from around the country. They want to bring their values to our state through her, and that's what we're fighting against. And we need your listeners out there or your viewers to go to BrianKemp2022.com and help us fight that narrative from around the country and keep Georgia moving in the right direction.
All right, as you await the results of the November election, your team did have a win, a legal win on Friday night. Here's the headline from the New York Times. Federal judge rules against fair fight action in Georgia voting lawsuit. That's a group aligned with Stacey Abrams. In reaction to the loss after 4 years of fighting, she said it uncovered a lot of problems in Georgia, and there's still issues of voter suppression and keeping people who want to vote from being able to vote in Georgia.
Well, listen, Stacey Abrams and her group lost on every single count in that ruling Friday. It's sad that since day one, she's used this whole process to line her pockets, sow distrust in democratic institutions, and build her celebrity status. And using the legal system for her own political gain, quite honestly. Thankfully, Judge Jones made it clear to all Georgians and people around the country that in our state it's easy to vote and hard to cheat. And look, she's spinning that narrative, Shannon. I mean, we just had record turnout in our primary, not only in the Republican primary, but also in the Democratic primary. And this is the same crowd that cost us an all-star game, saying that the new law that we passed to protect the integrity of vote was suppressive and Jim Crow 2.0. And we've had record turnout. And even though we lost the all-star game and Major League Baseball caved to her in that narrative, thankfully, the Braves won the World Series. Hopefully, we're going to beat the Mets tonight, win the division, and then repeat.
Okay, by the way, since you brought up the Braves, I want to ask you about that. They were just at the White House. There's been a lot of talk about them potentially changing their name. An AP article that was written, sort of an opinion piece during the World Series last year, where you guys were successful, says, pull the plug on it. Says, simply put, the Braves and their co-conspirator are on the wrong side of history, not unlike those who continue to defend the Confederate flag and statues as nothing more than peaceful symbols of Southern heritage. Is it time to have a more in-depth conversation about changing the name?
Well, I thought that was absolutely ridiculous for the White House to do that when they were honoring the Braves World Series. Listen, the Braves respect and honor Native Americans. We've had meetings in the governor's office about that. I think, again, this is just the woke cancel culture and really national values that are being trying to be pushed down to our states and other states around the country, which is why we got to stand up and fight for what our values are in the state of Georgia. And that's why this race is so important. You know, do you want to have a state that's going the way of the country right now with 40-year high inflation, bad domestic energy policy that's created a crisis at the gas pump, a crisis at the border, where every governor in the country is dealing with the runaway fentanyl coming into their states. And that's what I've been fighting against, and I'm going to continue to do that. You know, we've been trying to help Georgians fight through 40-year high inflation by doing tax rebates and cutting taxes, suspending the gas tax. And we want to do that in the future. We're going to do the same thing next year, another tax rebate, but also do a one-time property tax relief grant to help Georgians fight through the, you know, really it's the Biden-Abrams agenda in Washington, and we don't want that coming to our state.
Well, let's talk about some areas where critics think you're not doing so well. The issue of crime is one where voters do give Republicans an advantage. They trust you to handle this better. But here is what your opponent said when she joined us here back in June about how you're handling crime in Georgia.
But let's be clear, in the state of Georgia, violent crime went up 55% in 2019 to 2020 under Brian Kemp.
So why should voters choose you if crime is up on your watch?
Well, for one, unlike Stacey Abrams, I'm not going to defund the police. She said that. She believes it. She can spin that however she wants to now that she's in a political race again. But those are the facts. We passed legislation to keep rogue local governments from doing that. She wants to end cash bail and have get out of jail free. While she's saying all these things over a year ago when she thought it was the right thing to say because the political winds were blowing that way, I created a crime suppression unit. To date, we've arrested over 600 people that had outstanding warrants, 29 of them for murder. She should be talking to local officials that are in charge of local police departments, especially in the past, and wondering why are they not doing more. Thankfully now, we have the locals in the fight with us in Atlanta. We're doing a job that the state's not even supposed to do because our citizens deserve it. And I think there's a clear contrast on crime. People do not believe what Stacey Abrams is trying to sell them right now, and they certainly know what my record is. If you want to know about that, ask your sheriff, ask your local prosecutor, ask members of the State Patrol that you happen to see on the street or the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. We're going after street gangs. We're going after drugs, human trafficking, and other things in our state, and I'm going to continue to do that as long as it's needed.
Is it working?
Absolutely, it's working. I mean, look, taking 29 people in just a little over a year off the streets that had outstanding murder warrants. I mean, nobody else was chasing these people and arresting them in the city of Atlanta over the last 2 years. But thankfully we are, and now we have the Atlanta Police Department. They've been great partners under the new administration going after these criminals, dangerous criminals.
Okay, let's turn to another issue where the two sides don't agree either, and this is abortion. You've got a ban on most abortions after 6 weeks. This is a so-called heartbeat bill. Here's what Stacey Abrams says about that. There's no such thing as a heartbeat at 6 weeks. It is a manufactured sound designed to convince people that men have the right to take control of a woman's body away from her. New York Times reporting on this said, the sound that expectant mothers hear during a scan is created by the machine itself, which translates the waves of electrical activity into something audible. Now, a majority of Georgia voters, it shows in recent polling, they are not for this ban. Is it based on a mischaracterization of what's actually happening at that point in pregnancy?
Well, I think what Stacey Abrams said is absolutely ridiculous. As a father of 3 daughters, Marty and I both have seen heartbeats. You can take the volume off of the machine or whatever, but you can see the heartbeat. I know that. I've seen it myself, and I think the medical science is very clear on that. The issue with Stacey Abrams is you don't know where she is on this issue. You know, we passed the heartbeat legislation 3 years ago, Shannon. My position on this has been very clear. But I also value life in many other ways that a lot of Georgians do agree on. We've done adoption reform, foster care reform. Marty Kemp and the General Assembly in Georgia and our team is leading the country to end human trafficking, go after the perpetrators, but also to support the victims. You never hear Stacey Abrams talk about those issues. You know, she was pro-life. Then she was for late-term abortion. And on your show, she wouldn't answer the question of when it would be inappropriate for someone to have an abortion. Well, and then after that, when she figured the polling was bad, she changed her position again. So even if Georgians don't like my position on this issue, they at least know I've been truthful with them. And they can't say the same for Stacey Abrams. Well,
we have invited her on the show, and hopefully we'll have a chance to ask her those questions and follow up as well. I want to touch on something quickly. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporting that former President Trump may hold a rally there in Georgia, and they count out what they see as potential risk and downside for you if he does. Will you appear with him at a rally in Georgia?
Well, I'm not too worried about what the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's speculating on. They've been no friend of mine. I'm focused on speaking to hardworking Georgians, making sure that they know that I'm going to continue to fight for them every single day, to fight through 40-year high inflation, a disaster at the gas pump, a disaster at the border, and keep our state moving in the right direction. We got the lowest unemployment rate in the history of the state. We've had 2 record years in a row for economic development. No matter what your zip code is, you have the opportunity for economic prosperity. That is what I'm focused on. I can't control a lot of things that any newspaper's saying.
Well, but if the president, former president, shows up, would you campaign with him? Would you go to a rally? I know you guys have sort of a frenemy thing going on, but would it be a benefit to you, or do you think a detraction to show up with him on stage?
Well, look, that's not anything I can control. I'm focused on what I can control in this race. I've asked all Republicans to unite and support our ticket, and that's certainly what I'm doing, and I'm sure that he is as well, because he knows, like all other Republicans and people in the middle, that the focus needs to be on this president and what he has done that is hurting hard-working Georgians. I mean, Joe Biden said he would never raise taxes on working Americans and working Georgians, and he's now done that. At the same time, spending more money when we have 40-year high inflation. That's what people need to be focused on, and don't get distracted by the arguments that Stacey Abrams and other Democrats around the country are making, because they don't want to talk about those issues.
All right, Governor, we will watch and see if that rally happens, if you attend. We thank you for your time today and hope to have the same conversation with Stacey Abrams very soon. Thank you, sir.